Hello, everybody. Welcome back to an American Discussion podcast. I am one of your hosts, Michael, and with me, as always, is Drew. How are you today, Drew?
Doing good, buddy. I've been, working quite a bit. Not a whole lot exciting outside of that. I do actually I ordered a book off of Amazon. It's from this doctor. She's been doing a lot of her research in tribal lands in, I believe, South America. Working with a lot of tribes that live in the rainforest and such. So it has a lot of survival information. But one part that's in there that I think is really cool is making survival shelters like we used to do, when we were kids, going out in the woods and just making stuff.
Oh yeah, the Leaf Palace.
Yeah, exactly.
Lean-tos.
Yeah, it's got a lot of that stuff in there, so I'm excited to get it, and me and Amelia will go in the backyard and make some forts and see what's up. Get that fire burning.
All right, yeah, I loved doing that when I was a kid. Did we ever tell you about the time that my brother and I tried to go camp in a state park for a weekend, but we didn't bring anything?
Yeah.
So we basically tried to do kind of like a Survivor Man or into the wild or alone type deal where we just built a lean-to shelter. We brought a tarp and some water and made a little fire. I think we brought ramen noodles to cook, so we had a little pot and did that. Brought our fishing poles. Man, we had the whole weekend planned out, and you know how long we lasted?
8 hours.
It was more than 12 hours. We did end up sleeping one night, but we left pretty early the next morning. Yeah, I bet we could do it now, but it was just not very fun.
Dude, I'd be down to do that. Just you and me go out and see what we can do, just with a day pack.
Oh yeah,
we'll figure it out. I'm definitely down. We got to plan that next summer.
Oh yeah, that would be so much fun.
Mm.
Yeah, one of the problems with trying to do survival type situations is you got to find a place where it's okay to cause a little bit of damage.
Yeah.
You can't do that without disturbing some trees and the underbrush and all that kind of stuff. But you can definitely find places where you can practice those type of skills.
Yeah, I wonder if the DNR has resources for that. I don't even know how you'd search for that.
Well, here in Michigan, you can do dispersed camping, which obviously you are going to disturb, the woods around you if you dispersed camp because you got to clear out a spot for your tent and all of that. But it just takes a little bit of forethought and getting a permit and all the paperwork filled out.
I mean, I'm down. I don't care if I got to fill out paperwork; possible. It'd be fun.
Oh yeah, it would be a lot of fun. And even if we brought a tent, we could still practice all those skills. I think it's good to see what you're made of out there.
Oh, for sure. And it's been a long time since either of us have really done those. I know, we have experience from when we were kids, but being an adult and actually doing it's different.
Well, now that I have kids, I don't get out there very much at all. But
exactly.
We're going camping this weekend. Take them for their first time. That'll be fun.
Yeah, I think we're still planning on going, not the following weekend, but the weekend after over by you, so.
Oh, yeah. We actually looked at maybe camping in that same campground. At least the campground I think you're going to be camping when you
the Holland State Park.
But, yeah. But they were booked up, obviously. Labor Day weekend is one of the busiest camping weekends of the year.
Oh, I thought you meant the same weekend that we were going.
Oh, no, we looked into going this weekend. Next weekend, we're going to be at a music festival, so we wouldn't be able to join you guys for the camping, but we'll definitely be able to link up.
Well, it's not next weekend, it's the following weekend, the 13th.
Ah, well, even better. Then we won't be at a music festival, and we might be able to join you guys for camping.
Hell yeah, that'd be awesome, dude.
Yeah. Did you do anything fun over the weekend?
No, not really.
All right, well, moving on.
You?
Yeah, we took the kids to a car show. Pretty big car show. I know you're familiar with it. That runs along one of the main roads here in town. We actually drove their website for some reason listed the wrong location, and it was all the way across town. So we drove out there, had to turn around, drive back, and turns out the actual main location was 3 blocks from our house. So
so it worked out.
We spent an hour driving around for nothing, but yeah, it was still pretty fun.
Not the first time we've done that.
Yeah.
We used to call that Saturday evening.
Yeah, we would drive all over town, but when you got a couple of excited kids in the back, it's a little different.
Yep,
than when you're just cruising around looking for something to do.
Absolutely.
But yeah, and then we also took the kids to one of those little small family traveling circuses.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and I think you saw the video now, but I got pulled up on stage and got to do a really awkward dance routine and a couple of tricks with the clowns. So
I don't know about awkward, man. You looked really fluid out there. I could feel your sense of rhythm.
That clown wasn't giving very good directions. In fact, I don't think he said a single word the whole time.
Sounds like quite a few leaders I've had.
Yeah, point and grunt.
Yep.
Then give you a disappointed look.
Mm-hmm. Sounds just like some leaders I know. I use leaders loosely.
Well, we can always aspire to be better than those who came before us.
Absolutely, brother. Absolutely.
All right. Well, Drew, today it's your topic. So what are we talking about today?
Yeah, so today we're talking about something that I thought was pretty interesting. Happened last week. There was a ruling in a case, U.S. v. Tamori Morgan. Bottom line up front, it's basically a machine gun related case. There's a individual, Tamori Morgan, who was found to have a 300 blackout with an automatic conversion. I didn't see in the documents how specifically it was converted, whether it was forced reset, whether it was auto trigger, whatever.
Now, just really quick, for people who might not be familiar, what is that weapon?
Yeah, so a 300 blackout is a AR-style weapon. For specificity, AR is Armalite. It's named after the company that invented the first one. But its most commonly known version is the AR-15. So it's built on that same platform, but it's chambered in a round called 300 Blackout, which is one of the best guns for shooting subsonic rounds, which means slower than the speed of sound, where a lot of firearms most firearms nowadays are actually supersonic. So it shoots a larger caliber than a AR-15, but it shoots it slower. So it's basically just the same thing as like I said, an AR-15 with a bigger round, slower charge. So he was found with that. He was also found with a Glock switch, which I didn't see was attached to any weapon. I went back and read the case again. I didn't see that it was installed on anything. He just had the switch, which the ATF also classified as an individual automatic weapon. And they're doing that through a couple of different ways. They're doing it with the Gun Control Act of 1968, which is really just an expansion on the NFA, the National Firearms Act of 1934, which basically designated a few different classifications of weapons, of things to become weapons, right? So it gives you all your definitions for all the firearms, whether it be machine gun or attachments that go on it, such as suppressors. This is where we see our they're adding definitions for things like bump stocks or pistol braces or things like that. This is where the ATF gets all of their authority, essentially. So he was found with that Glock switch, which they had classified as a firearm, which they then arrested him on that. And the judge in the court, heard arguments from both sides. Obviously, the United States government tried to. Their whole argument was basically that machine guns are banned, you're not allowed to have them. Well, the judge says, actually, that's an infringement on the Second Amendment, so you have to back it up with historical references. Essentially is what they did. So they picked out a law from England. It was English common law from 1328, stating a bunch of different things. Basically, how people can carry military-style firearms in public. So it associates it with things like you can't carry around royalty, you can't carry in a place of worship, you can't carry in schools, you can't carry in an aggressive manner in public, things like that. And the judge basically said, okay, even if we are to take this common law from England, well before our country was ever formed, all that law says is how you can carry it. It says nothing about the possession therein of the military-style firearm. So on that grounds, the court ruled in Tamora Morgan's favor, stating that there's no constitutional reason to back up why machine guns are illegal, and also illegal for possession. Another argument that they tried to pull up was a common one that you see that the civilian population doesn't need military-style machine guns, and that it's an uncommon weapon. There's a case, New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin. This is known as the Bruin decision. It's really common in the Second Amendment community. And this is what allows the restrictions on, and this is a quote from the law, from the ruling, dangerous and unusual weapons. Obviously, a lot of firearms are dangerous. The implication in that is that excessively dangerous. But it's an and statute, which means it has to fulfill both of those, dangerous and unusual. The reason that's important is because the judge in this case said they're not unusual weapons. The reason they're not found to be unusual weapons is because they're in common use. And this statute, the common use phrase, comes along from, hold on, sorry, I'm trying to reference, Catano v. Massachusetts from 2016, where the ruling says the Second Amendment extends prima facie to all instruments that constitute bearable arms, even those that were not in existence at the time of the founding. This is when stun guns were made illegal by Massachusetts, and Katori was a female that was getting abused by her significant other, and then she was found with a taser later to protect herself from that significant other, and that's what she got in trouble for. Long story short, there's 630,000 registered machine guns as of the 2017 ATF report in the United States, all legal, all registered. And that's 3 times more than the number of stun guns that were in circulation at the time of the Caetano decision. So under that ruling, the judge says that it's not it is in common use and it's not an unusual weapon. So these are kind of all the things that the judge decided that they didn't have any ground to imprison Tamora Morgan. What this does is they did leave the door open in this law. For those that aren't familiar, that basically means that it's not a hard decision. Down the road, other statutes can be put in place against this decision, where there could potentially be a ban in the future on machine guns, but in this specific case, there is not sufficient evidence to deem that. So obviously this is going to get appealed up to a further court. Hopefully the Supreme Court rules on this. I know we have different opinions. I think we're pretty close on this one, though. In full disclosure, for all those that don't know, I'm not sure if we mentioned this at the top of the podcast, this is our second time talking about this one. Unfortunately, the original time we recorded this, it didn't take. I had a corrupted file for some reason. So we've already talked about this at pretty decent length, but obviously we want to go through and touch on the basics for everybody listening and kind of expand on what we talked about before. So real quick, I want to kind of put out my belief on not only machine guns, but the Second Amendment as a whole. I believe that the Second Amendment protects us against the tyrannical government. and that's the main purpose for it. I know a lot of people think it's for hunting or self-defense, but that's actually not what the amendment says. What it actually says, here's a quote: "A well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." So I tend to believe heavily in that last, the first and the last part, more so than the middle. The being necessary for the security of a free state. The founders meant state, and when they said that, they've discussed that as well. It's to prevent essentially federal government from being tyrannical to the states. So I think that every, for lack of a better term, swinging dick in the country, that includes females in this vernacular, should be able to bear arms, right? I think there's obviously some exceptions for things of the WMD classification, nuclear, biohazard, chemical, all that type of stuff. Incendiary munitions, I believe, should be regulated. And I'm not saying I think that they should just be willy-nilly, right? I don't think everybody should get a gun. Obviously, we should have restrictions on people that have mental conditions, that, especially prone to violence. I think if you've been convicted of a violent felony, I can understand why you may not be able to have a firearm. I do think there should be a trial period. I think that a lifetime ban is kind of crazy. I feel that way about federal voting rights as well. I think not allowing felons to vote for the rest of their life is kind of crazy. So that's kind of where I stand. I know mine's a little bit more extreme. I do think, for example, that if you can afford a tank, you should be able to buy a tank. That's the one that everyone goes to. Could you own a tank? I think you should be able to. If the goal is to protect yourself from a tyrannical government, you should be able to defend yourself from the same weapons of war with the same weapons of war. And that's my general stance on it. But I know yours differs a little bit, so why don't you tell me a little bit about that, Mike?
Yeah, sure thing. So, yeah, a lot of good stuff in that introduction there, and your discussion about your views. And again, just want to reiterate that we did take one crack at recording this episode already, and with the exception of the introductory stuff and kind of going over our stances on things, we're really not going to talk about the exact details that we talked about before. So I think it'll still be a very compelling discussion here. So to get into my stance, I am a supporter of the Second Amendment, and I think that the Second Amendment rights are important. And since the last time we talked about this, I was able to do a little bit more digging and research, especially on kind of the origins and where, like where the minds of the people were at the time of, writing the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. I think we're both in agreement that defending against, tyrannical government and, big political moves that the people don't agree with, that's definitely one aspect of it. Another aspect that I found was that at this time in American history, obviously America was very new. They were just coming out of, the Revolutionary War, and you still had England, France, Spain, all of these countries, in very close proximity to the United States, and they were not necessarily friendly nations at the time, at least not when you get into things like border skirmishes. And then as well, at that time in American history, you were also concerned about, skirmishes with the Native Americans, and potentially with slave uprisings, that kind of thing. So talking about a well-regulated militia to defend the country, that was really talking about like actual no shit defense of your own country's borders, because this was a time when that was necessary. And defend the people. So that is kind of where they were at that time. I've also seen some discussion about how the intent was really that each state would maintain a militia, or each state would maintain a series of militias, in their larger towns and, rural areas. And that was supposed to kind of eliminate the need for a standing army. So when you have, you're at the time, it would have been all of your fighting age men ready to be called up. Kind of, you could kind of think about it almost like a medieval, king or lord. They could just call up all of the men that owed them fealty and send them into war. They didn't necessarily keep a large standing army. So kind of the same thought there.
One thing I want to cut in with real quick, just for a little bit of perspective. I just looked up real quick. Bill of Rights came out in 1791. According to the 1790 census, the first census in American history, the population at the time was 3.9 million. So we're talking a much, much smaller scale than we are now, which I don't think aids us typically in the 2A argument, but I think truth is important to at least shine a light on in these conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. That's some great historical background as well. At that time, the borders of the United States were, the actual states was really just kind of consigned to that East Coast area. And obviously, we had settlers that were pushing out further west, but we were definitely not past St. Louis into the Western territories yet.
No, that was still owned by France at that point.
Yeah, yep, France, and you had Spain. That was also, just from my recollection of American history, I don't know about the specific year, but around that time period, you had them, in the kind of Mexico area, and as well in the Florida area.
Another big
kind of
colonial
along
power.
the southern border.
Another large colonial power at the time that a lot of people, I think, forget about is Portugal.
Yes, so lots of things kind of knocking at the door of those American settlers and original Americans. So that's the idea, and I do think that it's still important today. One of the cool things about American geography is that if there was a country that wanted to invade the United States, they would have to do it in almost every location all at once, because there is no way that you could push an offensive across America, and at the same time, it's almost impossible to blockade America because we have, natural harbors and deep saltwater ports all over the place.
We also have deep freshwater ports, for clarity.
That is true. We're surrounded by a lot of them.
Yep.
Right here in Michigan. The Great Lakes Basin is one of the, I think one of the coolest natural features in the world.
I agree. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, so I do think that the Second Amendment is important. I enjoy hunting and target shooting. I do own a firearm, and I'm looking into buying more now that I've settled down in a place where I feel like it's a more responsible decision. Not going to have any big cross-country moves, and I can maintain a gun safe and keep them locked up and out of reach of anybody else. So that's kind of my stance on the Second Amendment as a whole. When we talk about machine guns, that is where you and I kind of diverge. Now, I do have a little bit of cognitive dissonance on this particular topic. Again, when we talk about, the government tyranny and defense of the homeland from outside entities, I think that the American people should be armed, right? And automatic weapons are a very useful tool of war. Now, on the other hand, I have a family, and I have been fairly close to a couple of major shootings, and I think that having automatic weapons in the hands of just every American is a little extreme. So I personally don't think that I should be able to walk into a Cabela's or a firearms store and purchase an automatic weapon off the shelf. I do think there needs to be some kind of regulation there to, prevent a person from just going to get it. And we've talked about background checks before. I think it's a useful way to regulate who can get access to firearms in the moment. I know you have a couple of good rebuttals to the background check rule, and I'll let you get into that in just a second. But one thing that I do think is a big downfall of the background check rule is that you can't do a background check to assess somebody for their likelihood to go commit a violent crime. Because as a supporter of, I don't want to say strict gun control, but responsible gun control laws, I can acknowledge that most people that, commit these mass shootings and atrocities, they are first-time offenders in the eyes of, law enforcement or a background check, right?
Correct.
And you can't do a background check on mental illness. And, there's been some answers to that in the form of kind of these red flag laws, but that only does so much, and a lot of these people are also kind of antisocial and, wouldn't necessarily show outwardly that they were, going to go commit some kind of violent crime. So,
yeah. So I've got a couple of things on that. One, I think you touched on it beautifully. One of my biggest concerns with that is, as an umbrella statement, I think that it's very difficult to see who's going to be an offender, nor do I think that we should develop a plan. I know I've heard of everyone should be cleared by a shrink. I don't agree with that either. I think that you'll see a lot of situations where people, for example, in more blue-leaning states that tend to be, not even states, but areas that tend to be more strict on gun laws, would have a lower percentage of clearing people, where places that are much more, I'm going to say the word free, with gun laws, would have a much higher approval rating, right? As far as approving the ability to buy one. So I don't think that's a good metric. I don't think it's possible to be unbiased in that evaluation. I'm sure there's psychologists out there that disagree, whatever the case may be. But I think it's very difficult, at minimum, to be unbiased in that. And I don't think that one individual person should be able to infringe on another individual's rights.
And just to, kind of add some layer to that, it's also shown historically that it's very easy to kind of trick a psychologist or a psychiatrist on, a single meeting. So, it takes some time to establish a relationship and really get to know a person, but there are plenty of case studies of somebody, pretending to be mentally ill or, putting on a face and getting cleared in, just one single meeting. So
agreed.
I don't think that's necessarily a good idea either.
Yeah, and I think that's one of those things that I think would do more harm than good. As far as the other thing you mentioned with it being first-time offenders, we're seeing a lot of that. The Trump assassin was a first-time offender. He had no federal background. He legally, I don't know if he legally attained that firearm, but he can legally attain firearms at that point. He's over 18. He could have bought an AR-15 at 18 years old. So I don't see how that helps most people. because, like I said, most of these offenders are first timers. I do see where there'd be a purpose for a federal background check for firearms in general, but I still disagree with that, right? I think the risk outweighs the reward in that scenario, simply because, like we've said multiple times at this point, first-time offenders aren't going to show up on a background check anyway. And most of the people that commit gun crimes, maybe not definitively, this is just my opinion, I don't have a stat to back this one up, are probably getting these guns in a not-so-legal manner, right? A lot of your gun violence, the vast majority, this one is true, is either one of two things. It's either gang violence or it's suicide, right? Those are the two largest forms of gun violence in America. Suicide, I mean, that one is a different issue we can address separately. I don't think a background check is going to stop suicides. I don't see how it does. Because people are sad when they don't break the law, and people are sad when they do break the law. It's sad as an undersell, I realize that, but and I don't mean to disparage anyone's mental conditions. But people have issues regardless of if they're a criminal or not, right? Mental health knows no bounds. So I don't think that that's particularly helpful for the discussion. And gang violence, they're not getting the guns legally anyway, so they're not taking the background checks anyway, right? Most of them already have a record and would be denied weapons in the first place, so I don't find it particularly helpful for that. So that really just leaves lawful gun owners or lawful potential gun owners getting background checked. I also think it develops a database of records for people that are doing federal firearm background checks that can then be referenced if, God forbid, the government ever decided they did want to go and round up all the guns. They would have to really quickly reference that background check and know exactly where everybody's at, right? Know where all the guns are and go round them up. So I like the idea of a background check being helpful to screen out those felons, but it's hard because I don't see it being greatly beneficial. I think that risk of the government knowing exactly where everybody's weapons are is pretty scary, especially when the consideration for the Second Amendment is to protect against the government. As for
I can definitely understand where you're coming from there. The government that is potentially in this kind of extreme scenario that this is intended to prevent, the government having a list of everybody that could potentially
resist,
come head to head with them in combat, that's not necessarily a good idea. So I understand that, but the other thing I wanted to bring up was that I've also whenever you get into talking about those like mental health screenings or whatever that people suggest as maybe a means to kind of regulate who gets firearms. That gets into some other like health privacy details, and down to the point where it's getting very close to screening somebody for their health conditions prior to issuing them a firearm. So like taking a blood sample or running a DNA test for these different genes that could make you more likely to commit a violent crime, and that gets into some pretty dystopian stuff. And honestly,
and it goes against the Fourth Amendment, to be blatantly clear.
I do want to say that I haven't heard anybody suggesting that. I'm not saying like, oh, this is what such and such group is trying to do.
No,
I'm just saying that would be pretty awful.
Yeah, I haven't heard a politician say that, at least in the time that I've been politically cognizant. But I've definitely heard it from individuals that I've had the conversation with.
Yeah, and to your point about the Fourth Amendment, I don't think it would be against the Fourth Amendment if it was just a like, hey, you have to do this if you want to get a gun, but then again, you could say, is that violating your Second Amendment,
Yes.
or
So then you'd have a constitutional amendment layering issue, and courts have already found that the government's not allowed to not allowed to mandate a blood draw, for example, without at minimum probable cause, but typically a warrant, which is why a lot of people refuse the breathalyzer, because then they have to have warrant to go do a blood draw, right? Obviously, it only buys them a little bit of time, but that's why that's in place. That's not specifically why, but the government's not allowed to, at that point, search, right, or seize your blood.
Can I consent to let the officer draw my blood at the traffic stop, like while I'm still in my vehicle?
I have to imagine the answer to that is no. Oh, well, actually, no. Actually, based on your exact question, I'd say the answer to that is yes, you could consent to that in your car.
Yep. I think you're right.
You can consent whatever you want.
Do you think if I tricked a police officer into doing that I could then sue the police precinct for millions of dollars and retire?
I doubt that very seriously. Do you think I can consent the police officer into letting me draw his blood in the traffic stop?
I hope so. I want to find out.
Just go 95 in a 50 and you'll find out.
No, there was a court case recently, or I guess not a court case, but there was a case in, I want to say Australia or New Zealand, where a paramedic was fired because at the request of the person that he was responding to, he removed an object from her genitalia. Basically, he performed a medical procedure that he wasn't trained to perform. But the woman was too embarrassed to go to the hospital and just wanted it taken care of at home. So she let the paramedic get it out of there. And he got fired for that, even though both of them were completely happy with the outcome. He went on with his day and she didn't have a huge medical bill.
Or a huge whatever was in her.
Yeah.
He should have just waited till he was off the clock and gone by in his own time. Two consenting adults, man.
I don't know what she was doing with that bowling ball, but...
Yeah, I don't know anything about Australian law, if there is such a thing, but... so I don't know what any of that looks like.
Yeah, but... back to the topic.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys.
I'm not. That was funny.
So
we're allowed to be funny.
We're allowed to try. As for machine guns, so you touched on mass shootings, so that's another thing that I think we did talk about already, but I think it is important to reiterate. No one that I've spoken to supports mass shootings. I'm not seeing a big political movement out there for more mass shootings, right? Everyone's pretty much on the same page with this. As far as it being bad.
And if they were, they should not be allowed to have a weapon.
Yeah, no, I agree. If you're out there supporting mass shootings, you don't get a gun. I still think you should be able to say what you want to say, even though I think it's deplorable speech. I still think it should be allowed. But that's more of a First Amendment issue, not a second. So, as for machine guns and mass shootings, I do see how they can be used to rapidly increase the casualty-kill ratio, right? I think that they are much more dangerous than semi-automatics in that manner. I do not think traditionally that automatic weapons are more dangerous in a combat situation than semi-automatic fire, at least in my experience in the Marine Corps. They taught us pretty avidly that semi-automatic is far superior for lethality than automatic fire. Automatic fire is great for suppression, as far as keeping the enemy's head down, but it's not particularly great for putting rounds on target, right? As someone who shot quite a few, probably more than your average American fully automatic weapons, it's really hard to stay on target. That first round might go exactly where you want it to go, but that second one will not. So it is an issue. I can see how it is an issue in closer ranges, which most of your mass shootings are, with the exception of the largest one to date, to my knowledge, the Las Vegas shooting. That one was from a distance. So I don't know if he had an automatic or not. I know he had quite a few firearms up there, but
I believe they were all semi-automatic.
I thought so too,
which is,
but I wasn't
which
sure.
is why you had certain politicians calling for a ban on all semi-automatic weapons because they saw pictures of, the firearms that were used and said, "Oh my God, that's a semi-automatic weapon," without realizing that
Most weapons are semi-automatic.
what most modern weapons are.
Yeah, the things that political pundits say on firearms is baffling to me, particularly the left. And I'm not trying to take a hit. It's a pretty obvious observation. I've seen Democrat politicians say that an AR-15 will blow a softball-sized hole through a deer. That's insane. For all those that don't know, a .223 round with, or 5.56, depending on if it's what size charge essentially it is, shoot a round that's slightly bigger than a .22 caliber, which is typically used for varmint hunting, squirrels, rabbits, the like, birds if you're good. It's not a big round. The problem with the reason the AR is so lethal is its speed, the speed of the round. So it's less weight, moving very, very, very fast. But I've heard all sorts of things, right? Like, typically it's bastardizing the AR, just because that's the one that everybody sees in all the Call of Duty games and all the war movies and all that stuff. And I've also heard that
it's not an AR as in the AR-15. It's just that
style,
is the picture in most people's minds of an automatic weapon or a machine gun.
Yeah, and I'd love to see the numbers. I've never actually looked this up, but I'd be willing to bet that there's more civilian-owned ARs than there are military-owned M4s. I think the AR.
Maybe if you put all of the AR style rifles
in one grouping, yeah, that's what I was talking.
Or what you would call tactical rifles, or
don't use the bad word, Michael.
Pistols?
No, assault rifles.
Oh. No. Well, that's what I was going to say, is that, that's the image in people's minds of what an assault rifle looks like.
Yeah.
And then again, as you talked about, the AR designation doesn't help things when, most people misinterpret that as assault rifle.
That's just a convenient coincidence for people that want to try to restrain the ability to own that firearm. I feel like it's like it could have been any combination of letters, and it just so happened to be a perfect one for that nomenclature.
Are you saying that the Armalite company supports gun control?
No, that's why I said coincidence.
Oh. I thought you were implying that it was they purposely called it an AR so that it would be misconstrued as an assault rifle.
No.
Because it looks tactical like that.
No, I just think it's a wild coincidence. Like, what are the odds? But I also said the last one, as far as the semi-automatic discussion goes, I think you're right that a lot of people think of the AR-style weapon when they think of the Boogeyman assault rifle, or a tactical arm, or whatever you want to call it. Military style is another phraseology I hear come out a lot. But essentially, short of ergonomics, a conventional .223 AR-15 has almost the exact same capabilities of an M1 carbine that we used in World War II to defeat the Nazis, right? They're not vastly different. They shoot the exact same caliber round. You can have high-capacity magazines for both, and they have a very comparable rate of fire. So effectively, they're the same thing as far as the lethality of them. Obviously, ergonomics is going to be way better. Modularity of the AR is way better. Attachment possibilities is way better on the M4, on the AR-15. But at the end of the day, the lead going through the paper at the other end is going to be the same.
Yes, that's true. And when you were talking about it, I did just look up, a 5.56 round next to a .22 round. Yeah, and you're right. The diameter of the bullet itself is not that much bigger.
It's not. It's
what is bigger
0.22 versus 0.223.
What is bigger is the
cartridge.
The cartridge, which the powder charge inside is much bigger.
Yes.
Those 5.56 or 2.23.
Yeah, and so I implied that with the speed. I guess I didn't explain that for those that aren't super familiar with firearms. But yeah, absolutely.
I wouldn't necessarily expect everyone that's listening to be very familiar.
No, absolutely. You're right. That was a lapse in judgment of my own, so I apologize for that to any of our viewers that are not familiar with firearms.
And then the other thing is that the classifications of firearms is very confusing. So the laws that we were talking about earlier that designate what guns are classified as, it gets very convoluted. I'm sure you can talk a little bit more intelligently about some of those classifications, but one thing that a lot of people who aren't gun enthusiasts probably don't know is that a lot of these AR style weapons are classified as pistols.
Correct. There's a lot of different classifications of firearms that all came out of the NFA and the GCA, the National Firearms Act, and the Gun Control Act. There's a bunch. I would have to go through the ATF website and find the exact references of everything, but there's quite a few. And like you said, you have the SBR, short barrel rifle, short battle rifle, whatever they call it. Effectively the same thing. That is any rifle with a barrel shorter than, I believe, 16 or 14 inches. I think it's 16 inches. And it cannot be shouldered, is the verbiage in the law. Which is why you see the pistol brace workaround, where people will have a 10-inch barrel SBR, and then they'll put a pistol brace that then allows them to shoulder it. I mean, technically you could shoulder it without it, but you're just going to have that buffer tube jabbing into the back of into your shoulder. Be very unpleasant. So the pistol brace has been a workaround on that, and that's why you're getting a lot of kickback on the pistol brace, which it's always been a weird thing to me, because they're arguing that assault rifles are more dangerous, which is why they have this separate classification for pistols that allows for SBRs to even exist. But most gun crime is caused by pistols. Most mass shootings are caused by pistols. So pistols are much more dangerous than rifles. I can look up the stat next time you're talking, but it's pretty staggeringly different, right? Most firearm crimes are committed with pistols. And that mainly comes down to concealability and utility, right? You can tuck a pistol in your pants pocket. It's a lot harder to tuck a rifle in your pants pocket, which I think is also a notable thing for mass shootings in general, that it is much easier to do, and most of them are also committed with pistols. An automatic rifle, at least, is going to be large, right? The M4 would probably be your smallest in class, unless you're getting into a old school FAMAS or like a P2000, something with a bullpup design. But even those are still going to be pretty bulky. I know I'm throwing a lot of words out there for those of you that aren't familiar with firearms. Feel free to look those up. Bullpup design basically just means that the receiver is back towards the shoulder and not in front of the not above the trigger housing group, which is typically where your rear hand sits on a rifle. For AR style weapons, that's where the round, where the explosion happens, is in the chamber. With bullpup designs, that chamber is moved further back into the rifle to make it more compact and ergonomic. So that's a little bullpup brush up for you guys. If you're interested in some examples, like I said, the FAMAS, FAMAS, the F2000, the AUG is a very popular one in video games. Those are all bullpup designs. So those would be easier to conceal in a mass shooting situation. And if you had one of those fully automatic, like the G18, the Glock G18 is a fully automatic Glock, obviously that would be much more dangerous than a 249, right? 30-06 or 308, I don't remember which one. Fully automatic machine gun that's typically mounted on vehicles, or the 50 cal you see on top of tanks and stuff like that. You're not lugging one of those bad boys into a school or into a library or anything like that without a lot of
and that's actually exactly the reason why those short barrel rifles are illegal and were outlawed in 1930. I mean, there was a ton of gang violence in 1930. It looked a little bit different than what you imagine now, but a lot of that gang violence was directed towards law enforcement.
Yes, back in the day.
At the time, so that was one of those big driving factors, I imagine. But the concealability of a rifle with a short barrel, that is that was exactly the reason that then, and I think it's still the reason now. But as we talked about, those AR style rifles and pistols that can be easily converted into a rifle by just putting that pistol brace, which essentially the only difference between a pistol brace and a normal stock is just how it attaches to the weapon.
That's not true.
And would you care to explain the difference?
Yeah. So
just give me 1 second to finish up my thought, and then I'll let you go at it with the specifics of firearm design.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I nerd out about this.
But I think that that is one big loophole that we need to be consistent about. So either we reclassify those weapons and make them all legal, or you say it doesn't matter anymore. Everybody has one of these things essentially, so why are we restricting them at all? And I tend to lean towards the latter, just to make these laws less confusing, more user friendly, a little more streamlined, and we can still do smart gun regulation without going overboard because we think something looks scary.
I agree with that. Couple quick points I want to get out of the way, and then I will retort to that if I remember. To the stat that I said I'd look up next time you're talking. In the mass shootings, this is off Statista. I don't know the validity of this, but this is based off a apparent study from 1982 to 2024 from the Statista Research Department. Of the incidents reported, I'm going to go off of the number of incidents, so they have it for the number of instances or the number of firearms, but I'll go to instances because obviously if you're using multiple firearms... Actually, we'll use firearms used. That way it shows how many of them were actually used. So 167 mass shootings were committed with handguns, followed by 70 rifles were used on mass shootings, so that's over double for handguns. And then shotguns comes in with 32, so almost half of as many as rifles, and a magnitude of 5, 6 for the comparison to pistols. So there's that.
Now I do wonder if they are using the correct classifications per the ATF's
per the NFA and the GCA,
or if they are or if they're using more common vernacular there. I
would assume, but I really have no idea. As far as the pistol brace conversation, actually, before I get into that, you mentioned 1939, the banning of the short barrel. That was actually in a U.S. case, for those that are curious, U.S. versus Miller in 1939, and it was exactly what Michael was saying. It was based off of short barrel sawed-off shotguns, though, and it was saying that it allowed for a sort of, I want to say, loophole for the federal government, where it says it was used to support to ban weapons not useful for military service. And this is actually where you start seeing the division of weapons into categories. So, little historical background for you guys. As for the pistol brace, so the largest portion of it comes down to surface area touching the body. So where a stock has a solid surface area in the back, typically, to displace the recoil when it shoots, a pistol brace will typically have a much thinner, hard portion, a polymer portion, wood portion, whatever it is. Typically they're made of polymer. I've only ever seen them in polymer, but I'm sure there's woodworkers out there, which now that I have the idea might be one we know here soon. It typically has a thinner edge, about a ½ inch, that makes kind of a sideways wide open U down the length of it. And then it has a strap. And the design of that is so that you can put your arm through it and then strap the brace around your forearm. And that's why it's called a pistol brace and not a stock. Because the intent of the attachment is to strap it to your arm to increase accuracy when shooting. So it's not about the attachment to the firearm, it's about the use on the individual. It's just for clarity's sake there.
Yes, and that's a good clarification on the actual kind of mechanics of it. I guess my point was more so that it's serving the same purpose. Obviously, it's not going to be as comfortable when you're shooting, and it's not it doesn't lend itself to accuracy as much. But when we're talking about these mass shootings where people are kind of just shooting wildly into a crowd or trying to just hit as many people as possible, I think it kind of serves the same purpose there.
Yeah, I can concede that. And a lot of gun nuts are the little, like a lot like me, where I will find any linguistic loophole I can find, even in simple conversation, let alone if it's against the government.
Oh, don't I know that all too well?
Got to be very fucking
You're
specific.
You're a semantics expert.
I love it. It's a fun hobby for me. And so they're always like, well, technically this is a pistol brace, not a stock. Meanwhile, 95% of the people that I know of use it as the same way interchangeably as they would with a stock. So no.
Yes, exactly.
I can see that argument, but semantically, when it's going against the law, I mean, if rich people can use corporate tax law, I can use semantics in corporate tax law, I can use semantics in firearms law. Just because they're rich and I'm not doesn't mean I can't work my way around the law as well. So, I think it's...
You can also go offshore and commit as many firearms violations as you want, just like they can move their money around.
Exactly.
Unmolested.
Exactly. I'm going to take my RPG and my HIMARS and go out in the middle of the ocean in international waters and do whatever I damn well please. But no, back to damn, I already forgot your note. Remind me.
Well, I will remind you in just a moment, but speaking of firearms violations in international waters, I did tell this on our first recording, and I think it's worth mentioning now just because of the cool factor, but the only time that I've fired an automatic weapon in the automatic mode of fire is when I was in the Navy, standing on top of a submarine on the 4th of July, shooting out into the middle of the ocean. And that was pretty badass.
Yeah, no, that is dope. That's the most American way to spend 4th of July, I think.
I think it's the most American thing I've ever done.
It's probably the most American thing you will ever do.
It might be the most American thing anyone's ever done.
I don't know. I'm sure there's some hard charging door kickers out there that have done some wild patriotic stuff. I tend to think the guy with the killdozer is pretty American too. At the roots of it. As for the my full auto experience, I've shot multiple times in the Marine Corps. The most fun, I think, was we were at the end of a JTF and we had a bunch of ammo on a pallet that if it goes back, it's got to be counted, right? Just speaks to government waste. But we decided, hey, we're going to do our qualification. We did a pistol qual out there, and so everyone that went could be pistol qualified. And then we just dumped it. So I had a M4 at the time issued to me for that mission. And so we just flipped that bad boy on kill and got her going. So I dumped hundreds of rounds that day, I'm sure. Both through my M4 at full auto. It's fun. I'm not going to lie to anybody. It's not. I'm not going to try to act like that guy who's all firearms are all serious. They're a lot of fun too, and I enjoyed it. Again, I didn't have much accuracy of it, but it was a blast to do. I recommend anyone that can go to a safe environment where they can experience that. I know a lot of firearms dealers have federal firearms licenses high enough that they can purchase those firearms, and a lot of them rent them out. So if you have an opportunity like that near you, I highly recommend it just for the experience. Right, we are blessed to live in this country where that is an opportunity. Take advantage of it.
Yeah, and I think it'll also give you an appreciation for just why they're so dangerous if you were trying to, shoot indiscriminately, and why they're not that effective for
absolutely
trying to be accurate. So if you were in a wartime situation and you're trying to, accurately hit a target on fully automatic, that'll definitely show you why that's not a great idea. And speaking of your experiences in the Marine Corps, what is the purpose of an automatic weapon for warfare?
So I touched on that a little bit earlier in one of my little rants, but essentially it's primarily used for suppression. I know it's also used for anti-vehicle. It was used a lot in conventional warfare, for especially trench warfare. But it's typically for the same reason, suppression. It keeps the enemy's head down. If you keep hearing bang, 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 and you're hearing whizzing over your head, you're not going to stick your head up there, right? And that allows for cover and move, right? Which is literally beaten into you in the Marine Corps as far as he's up, he sees me, I'm down. They call it bounding. So basically, if we have a fire team of 4 guys, one guy's laying down rounds in that direction, while the other guys are moving. And you typically do it in buddy pairs, so you'll have 2 guys shooting and 2 guys running. And then they'll dive down, they'll start shooting, the guys behind them start running. And you just keep that going the whole time. What this does is this allows for rounds to always be going down range. Everyone's depleting ammunition at about the same rate, so you don't have one guy with no ammo and one guy topped off. But that's where your light machine guns come in real handy, because they're carrying a lot of ammo. They can shoot it really quick. And it's scary, right? Hearing that out loud, hearing that, especially coming at you, especially as a guerrilla force, that's scary stuff to hear. So yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, now I think we've given a lot of background, talked a lot of specifics about weapons and firearms. So I do want to touch on what we think this should look like.
I agree.
And before I'll turn it over to you first on that regard. But I do want to just say that this court case did not just open the floodgates for people to go buy automatic weapons. This was not a regulation breaking court case. Well, this was just about, did they violate this one person's constitutional rights, basically?
It also,
or I guess, does he have the constitutional right to do that?
Yeah, and so what is doing is establishing jurisprudence, which basically expands our rights as civilians, showing that, hey, if a previous court has ruled this way, that's why this is the way. So, no, you're right, it doesn't blow apart the NFA or anything like that, and it will be appealed to the Supreme Court, who I think will bring it back a little bit, right? As far as what we think should happen next. So, I think that there should be some regulation on fully automatic firearms just because of the significant risk that it could pose to the public, right? Again, I don't think it should be a lifetime ban for anyone, short of people that are convicted of violent felonies with a firearm, typically. I think there should be a period ban for people convicted of violent felonies without a firearm. I think it's pretty well documented at this point in time that most crime is committed by a younger group, right? It tends to be your mid-teens to late 20s, early 30s is where most of your crime is being committed. And I think that comes to say something about people, right? We tend to mellow out as we get older, particularly young men as testosterone starts going down, blah, 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 blah. But What a regulation I think I would support, or at least be more inclined to support, would be a tiered system, right? I think that you should have some way to prove that you're responsible with firearms and that you're not an outwardly violent person. What I think that looks like is you have to own a firearm for, I think 7 to 10 years is a good spot. I think it gets rid of a lot of the shiny toy aspect that firearms can sometimes bring. And I think that also gives a lot of time to get out of your teens and out of your early 20s, where I think a lot of the volatility is, especially for young men. So I think a 7-year window of owning a firearm. I'm not saying 7 years after you turn 18, so automatically 25. But from the time you purchase your firearm, 7 to 10 years after that, you become eligible to submit for a fully automatic firearm. I think at that point, for fully automatic, you should still have a background check. Right? I think that because of what we've talked about with fully automatic firearms, I don't think they're the most effective thing for warfare. I think they're effective for suppression, but I think that can also be garnered from, like we just talked about earlier, bounding. So I think that's less of a issue on that front. I do still think we should be able to have them, though. Let's not get that confused. So I think a 7-year window after purchasing a firearm, passing a background check, if you commit a violent felony at that point, let's say a 5-year ban no matter what, and the clock resets on your 7 years. So the way I would see that is you get a 5-year ban, and then at the last day of your 5-year ban, the next day is when your 7 years starts. And then if you commit another violent felony, then you get a longer sentence, a 10-year ban. Right, so now we're talking 22 years at that point. Most people are going to be probably good within that 22-year window, right? I think that's safe to say most people in there, because let's say you can only buy a firearm at 18, you buy a firearm that day, 7 years later, you can get it, so if it's 25, you can submit for it, but if you commit a crime anywhere in that window, 5 years on top, let's say you committed at 19, at 20 even, because it makes the math easier, 5-year ban, so that's 25 when you can purchase another firearm. And then 7 years after that is when you could do the machine gun permit, we'll say, for convenience sake. So that's what? 5, 7, 12, so that puts you at 32 at the point that you could have a machine gun. Commit another ban, that's another 10 years, plus the 7 windows, that puts you at 49. I think we start getting a lot more responsible as we age, so I think that's a better system than a flat-out ban. I don't like the full-stop revocation of rights for almost any circumstance, short of capital offenses. So that's kind of what mine would look like if I could have a solution just to this machine gun case, and I think it looks good that way as well for as far as penalties for committing felonies for other rights as well, your firearms rights and your voting rights and everything like that, things that are taken away from convicted felons.
Yeah, I do think that's a pretty decent solution. Now, another suggestion that I've been thinking about is, maybe having automatic weapons available for commercial use. Kind of how you were talking about it, if you find a dealer, somebody that has an FFL that can, kind of rent these out or something like that. Maybe, somebody that has an FFL can just maintain, automatic firearms in their possession, or, like you were saying, for commercial use. So let's say a business has 50 automatic weapons that they use for, basically renting out on the range, or, film or whatever it is. Now, the issue with kind of that and your scenario is that they're still government regulated. So again, like we were talking about, the government would have a list of every person with that. And, honestly,
That's a point I'd be willing to concede with fully automatics, like I said.
90, yeah, that's true. 99.9% of the time, it's not going to matter. The government's never going to just like knock on your door and come round people up based on a list of firearms holders. But that is that's the like doomsday worst case scenario.
You mean the reason the Second Amendment was written?
Right. Well, yeah. One of the ideas behind why it is cemented as a right.
So you mind if I ask you a couple?
That we have as
quick question. Oh, unless you're not done. If you're not done, continue. Sorry for cutting in.
I mean, I can kind of spitball on some more specifics, but that was really just kind of the broad idea that I had was, have somebody, certain individuals that are permitted to maintain, a stock of these automatic weapons for whatever purpose, and, obviously they're not beholden to the government. So if there was government tyranny or an invasion of the United States or something like that, they, would be more than happy to distribute them, I'm sure.
So I'm real interested in this. I do have a couple questions for clarity's sake. Are you saying that you don't think any private citizens should be able to get it unless they get permitted? Otherwise, they have to go to a permitted individual to have access to a fully automatic firearm?
That's correct.
Okay, so a couple of things on that. First is availability, right? So if someone in rural, not Arkansas, I'm sure they have pretty rapid access. Say they're in
New York City.
No, let's say you're in rural Kansas, right? And there's not a town near you for 80 miles, right? You're not going to have a level 3 FFL dealer that has access to those near you, right?
You're probably also not under any like immediate duress during some sort of scenario like this. You're probably okay for a while.
But that doesn't mean your rights are any less valid than mine, right? Can we agree to that?
That's true.
So you still have the right, in my opinion, to have those firearms, and just because you're not part of the special club, you can't have them. I'm against that. Another thing you run into is there's still a private business. I'm assuming you're talking businesses, unless you're talking there's individuals in the community that can get permitted and then they're good to go, and they can have firearms.
That was kind of the idea that was in my head. Those two scenarios: somebody that's permitted as a private citizen, or also
then
people that maintain them for commercial use.
So why can't we all get permitted for use? What's the number? What's the cap?
I mean, you could. You can right now. The big hurdle to overcome with that is really time and money.
Exactly. So poor people don't get as many rights as rich people. I think we both disagree with that.
Yes, I would disagree with that.
So these are a couple issues I'm seeing. Another one, say it's a private person. Maybe you don't have an FFL dealer near you, but your sister's ex-boyfriend, Pete, he has fully automatic machine guns, so maybe Pete will let me, but actually Pete hates you because you're related to his sister, but Pete's the only one in the county, so who else are you going to go to?
Hold on, I'm confused about the family tree here. So was Pete dating his sister?
In this analogy, yes.
In your scenario?
But they broke up. It was not amicable.
So Pete is your brother also? And
No. Nope. So Pete dated your sister, and they broke up in a very not pretty way. Not violent or anything. They just, don't like each other. So now Pete's not going to let you use firearms, and your rights are infringed because of whatever, right?
So I think that what I'm getting at is that, so first of all, there have been Supreme Court cases that have confirmed that, the government does have the right to regulate firearms.
No, right? We're talking about how we regulate them, and I'm asking questions based on your proposed regulation.
And like, as it stands right now, like a private citizen really cannot purchase an automatic firearm.
Unless it's made before, 1986. Pre-1986, so like Thompsons, BARs, things like that can still be owned by civilians.
So my thought here was expanding access, but not, still putting them in the hands of private citizens. So this is going to probably open a whole nother can of worms that we don't really have time to get into at this point. But one of the big things that I see as a flaw with your plan is that if we're trying to prevent these, mass murder situations, putting them in the hands of private citizens also puts them in the hands of unauthorized citizens, right? So you're essentially just putting your trust in the person that has the firearm.
I want to clarify that's not the case.
They will maintain it, protected and safe from, somebody.
Oh, that yes, yes, but
accessing the firearm without their knowledge, or
yeah, I mean we have that now though with regular firearms as well, though.
That's true, and that's what I was going to say. That's something that we do see a lot with some of these school shootings, is that they are firearms that they had access to, but they weren't their own, right? So like the kids that committed the Columbine shooting, and then the recent case here in Michigan. Those are two pretty high profile examples, but
one thing I want to say to that
it has happened a lot more than just those two.
I tend to be more right absolutist than you do. I think our rights are. I mean, I'm not a religious man, but I think that the phrasing in the founding documents is good phrasing. That the rights were given to, they're God-given rights, right? So they should not be able to be infringed by government without extenuating circumstance. As it stands now, a very, very small portion of gun violence, like we already talked about, is caused by mass shootings. I don't think that infringing on the rights of hundreds of millions of Americans for double-digit crimes, as atrocious as they are, I don't want to try to downplay the severity of those situations, and they're tragic, and I 100% agree that they're wrong, and we should do something about that. That being said, I don't think we should infringe on the rights of the masses for the few. You see what I'm saying?
I know you disagree. I see what you're saying. And but I do think that the government also has a duty to protect the people of the country, right? And we've talked about that before as well. So how do you kind of weigh those two things, right? So,
yeah, absolutely. So I'm a strong believer in school resource officers as far as the school shootings go, because that's a gun-free zone. Either school resource officers, that prevents a lot of the controversy around guns in classrooms. I do see how an unstable individual, even if they are a teacher, could lose their cool in a middle school class and have a gun in the cabinet and cause an issue. But I think having a school resource officer and funding for school resource officers would be a good thing. I know my high school had one. I'm sure, given your high school's proximity to another mass shooting location, also probably had them. I think that's one step in the right direction. But I don't think that infringing on the rights of the many is beneficial. As far as the public situations, I think that, look, a lot of the population is armed. A lot more people walking around you are carrying firearms every day than you realize. I've become much more cognizant of it since I've started carrying. But I see a lot of people out in public that they have a little print, and I know exactly what that is based on the location it is and draw locations and everything like that. So a lot of that would be handled. More, there's stats out there too. I'm going to have to pull it up at a different time, but there are stats out there. More lives are saved from people carrying firearms than are taken if you take out gang violence and suicides, right? Which I think we'd all pretty much agree that those aren't things that we're discussing right now. We're talking about your average civilian causing harm to another, not necessarily gangs shooting gangs or people unfortunately shooting themselves.
Now that statistic I find very hard to believe. So I would definitely want to see some unbiased numbers.
Absolutely.
Something that's not coming from a gun lobby group. But or and if it involves police officers and those type of things, because if you add in law enforcement, I'm sure that does.
Oh, absolutely. No, I'm talking about civilian gun use.
I'm sure that does apply, but I would be floored. I would be astonished if you presented me with a statistic that said that people with guns prevent more crimes than people are shot with guns and violence.
Again, that's ruling out gun violence from gang violence or suicide as well, which are the two largest proponents. I'm going to look this up real quick if you want to start wrap up, and I'll go ahead and come back with it.
You do also have people that are just committing. I don't want to say your run-of-the-mill murders. That sounds really horrible to say, but you know what I mean. Like a person that's committing a domestic crime and killing their significant other, or these murder suicides, and people just eliminating their entire families or close relatives, things like that. Those also happen every day, and that's another unfortunate statistic for gun violence. But those I don't think would be solved with gun control regulations, because if you look at countries that do have very strict gun control, people are still killing their significant others and doing things in fits of rage like that. They will find a weapon. Humans are very resourceful. We didn't have firearms for the first, hundreds of thousands of years of our existence, and we still found a way to murder each other and every other creature on Earth.
Absolutely. I mean, humans are capable of very, very bad things. So I found this one. It's BradyUnited.org. I can send this to you. I'll also look up other off mic as well, showing that 60% of gun deaths are suicide, 37 are homicide, and that includes the 1% that are mass shootings, and the remaining 3% are gun deaths include law enforcement involved shootings, unintentional shootings, and those that were undetermined the cause. So
what was the percentage from mass shootings?
1%.
1%.
Yep. So I think that goes to my point of we're talking, realistically, you and I are talking about a 1% situation. Even if you include the law enforcement shootings or those that are undetermined unintentional shootings, we're talking about 4% of gun violence in the country. And I don't think restricting 99% of civilians' rights for 4% of gun violence is reasonable.
See, and there's different perspectives on that, right? So like I want my children to feel safe when they're going to school. I don't want to feel like I'm having to look over my shoulder when I go to a concert or a movie theater, things like that. So
both of those,
and obviously I know.
Michigan.
Obviously, I know, with my stance on the Second Amendment and, basically declaring my support for, semi-automatic weapons, that doesn't necessarily rule out gun violence, but, I do think an automatic weapon is a little bit, it's a little bit extreme of a risk, because you can take one person that maybe would have killed 10 people and turn it into 100 people in the right scenario.
So I 100% agree with you that fully automatic firearms are definitely an increased risk, and I guarantee they would change that mass shooting number. That being said, I just want to read real quick off the back of the Michigan Concealed Pistol License. Prohibited premises. And we can get into, gun-free zones at a later date, but the two you mentioned previously are typically, depending on the size of the theater, you're not allowed to have a firearm in any way. So school or school property, childcare, daycare, all that. Sports arena or stadium, not allowed to have it. bar, tavern, or where the sale and consumption of liquor is the primary source of income. Church, synagogue, mosque, a place of worship. Entertainment facility with a capacity of 2,500 or more. Hospitals, dormitory or classroom of community college or university, or a casino. All not allowed to have it. One of them, at bare minimum, has been a place where a mass shooting has occurred, where potentially it could have not occurred had other people been armed. Not really, because he shot from a building across the street. But I say that to say there's already places where you can't carry guns. I think if you apply comparable laws there, obviously it's not going to change anything. But if you add comparable laws there, that would be a good deterrent as well, at least.
I will say that I know you just read that big list of gun-free zones, but I know several people that carry concealed weapons, and they do not remove their weapon no matter where they go, because they say, who is going to see it?
And that's their prerogative. I'm not encouraging anyone to break the law. I mean, I take my gun off anytime I go in one of those locations. Begrudgingly, but I take it off. So.
All right. Well, I think we lined up pretty well on the basis of what we think about the Second Amendment and what should and shouldn't be regulated. The nitpicky details about how that's going to happen, we'll leave to the politicians, and then we'll complain about it. So
absolutely.
I had a great discussion.
Same way.
I hope you did too. Do you have any final remarks before we wrap it up?
No, I mean, everyone just keep an eye out. These things are in the courts all the time. They're really interesting. I know there's a lot of gibberish to get through as far as legalese, but the best population of American citizens is an informed, armed population of the American citizens.
All right. Well, with that, we're going to end the show as we always do. I had a great time. We might disagree, but we can always come and have a civilized discussion. I love you, Drew.
I love you too, buddy. Until next time, everybody, thanks for watching.